Surrounded by enemies, at its narrowest point, Israel is just 15 miles wide. It has no oil, no natural resources, and a population of barely 10 million. And yet it has built one of the most powerful militaries in the world. And unlike most superpowers, Israel faces threats on almost every border. At one point last year, it was dealing with enemies on 5 fronts at once. So how does a country this small survive in one of the most dangerous regions on Earth? I'm Simon Deans, and this is Superpowers Exposed. Today we're going to break down how Israel built a military designed for permanent war. Beginning in the bottom left-hand side, we've got Gaza, very much put in the news at the moment, a Hamas stronghold. Moving up, then heading northwards, north of Israel, we have Lebanon itself. As a moment, it's also a stronghold of Hezbollah. And Hezbollah was one of the most heavily armed of Iran's proxy forces used against Israel itself. And then moving very far east now, some 1,500 kilometres, we then look at Iran itself, a large country dominating the eastern side of the Gulf with some 93 million people. And since 1979 has been in the control of the Islamic regime, an Islamist revolutionary regime. They established a series of proxy militias, and we've been dealing with them in some of the previous episodes, the Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthi rebels from Yemen itself. And they've developed, as we saw again in an earlier episode, a significant missile and planned nuclear weapon capability as well. But the distance is huge. Between Tel Aviv and Tehran, there's some 1,500 kilometres, that's 900 miles. Lastly, in terms of internal enemies, is the Yemen itself, the bottom end of the Red Sea. And here we're dealing with the Houthis. And the Houthis themselves are Shia rebels, which is why Iran has fixed on them to support them. And then lastly, we have the West Bank. The West Bank is one of the 2 areas that are deemed as part of the Palestinian Authority areas. And there's a continual low-level insurgency and protests against Israeli occupation of the West Bank ongoing there. So we've briefly gone through the 5 fronts that Israel has to contend with almost simultaneously. And that in itself is part, perhaps, of what you might regard as superpower behaviour. Because the reality is a proper superpower is one that's able to deal with more than one issue at the same time. But for Israel, this is something they had to do right from the very beginning. The question is then, how do they do this? How does the people of Israel cope with potentially up to 5 fronts all simultaneously? So how does Israel actually fight a war like this? And to look at this, we're going to focus on its campaign against Iran. In this video here, we're going to show you the strike on Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's underground bunker. Bear in mind, this was conducted over 1,500 kilometres away from Israel itself. And it's both a triumph of intelligence and intelligence gathering and then precision targeting. Not just the location itself, but also the timing. And it's one of the reasons why this particular war apparently started early in the morning. And that was because that's when Ayatollah Khamenei had his meetings itself. What it shows, though, is the significant reach that Israel has, very much the mark of a superpower. Good espionage on the ground, good intelligence, and then the ability to reach out over 1,500 kilometres and to seek out and destroy the whole of the bunker complex immediately when Khamenei was at his most vulnerable. In this video, we can see the attacks that took place last year. And here we can see footage of Israeli special forces operating inside Iran itself. The ability to deploy special forces, again, is indication of their ability and also their status as a superpower. Here with the target, you can see they're engaging directly against part of the facilities, which are part of the Iranian nuclear program. The Israelis rightly have been very concerned about the build-up of Iran's nuclear program itself. And that was the impetus, the drive for the operation that took place last year in conjunction with the Americans itself. It wasn't just a matter of the development of their weapon systems, but also the development of launchers, missiles able to reach from Iran to Israel itself. Here we can see some of the facilities which the Iranians had designed to conduct the enrichment of the uranium beyond the 60% they already had, up to 95%, which gives them up to 11 nuclear bombs. Reaching some of these targets required the assistance of the Americans, because you can see, even in this reconstruction, that they're buried substantially underground itself. The Israelis were able to strike on the surface and do damage to some of the surface facilities, but they needed the US bunker busting bombs to actually reach down and hit some of the facilities that were underground itself. What all of these videos show is a good illustration of Israel's capability. Extensive recce and intelligence preparation, good collaboration with intelligence forces and obviously people who are working with them inside Iran itself. Beyond even identifying the targets, there needs to be detailed preparation for the actual operation itself, which they're capable of. And then the last element, which is very much part of the strength, one of the key superpower strengths Israel has, is the use of high technology. They worked out very early on that if they were going to match the scale and range of threats that they had to deal with, as we said at the beginning, up to 5 enemies or threats at any one time, they needed to be able to use technology in order to do so. And we've just seen in these operations here against the nuclear facilities that Iran had, that they use all the high tech at their disposal. One advantage that Israel has, it may seem slightly, almost like an inverse element, is of course its size. We discuss it's relatively small, but what that does mean is that they can move forces or resources, military resources, quickly from one front to another. Think about a modern fighter jet able to fly perhaps 500 knots. It can cover the distance from one end of Israel to the other, literally in a matter of minutes. So 1 minute it could be operating against a threat to the south, next minute flown to the north, and dealing with the threat up there as well. And this is very much something that Israel has been working on over the years. Israel was able in 1973, dealing with 12 enemies at once, to move its forces rapidly from one front, from the Golan Heights against Syria, right down into the Sinai against Egypt, and then up into the Lebanon, if required, in that area as well. So this has been very much a characteristic of the way in which Israel has prepared for war. It is always assumed it has to deal with multiple threats at once, and therefore organised and prepared its military to operate on that basis. But fighting multiple wars creates another problem. Israel is under constant attack. So how does it protect its cities while still fighting on multiple fronts? One of the things we've seen in action both in the fighting last year in June 25, but also more recently in the struggles against Hamas in Gaza and now in the war against Iran, is the use of the very impressive Israeli air defense system. People talk about this as the Iron Dome. Actually, Iron Dome itself is a very specific part of this. But the key thing to understand is that Israel has developed a layered air defense system, enabling it to deal with multiple threats all at the same time, including from rockets, drones, and anything else that Israel's many enemies might throw at it. And here we can actually see the Iron Dome system in action over Tel Aviv. The system itself was developed by a company called Rafael, and it specialised in intercepting short-range rockets, artillery shells and UAVs from 4 to 70-kilometre range itself. It quickly identifies threats targeting populated areas and then uses Tamir interceptors to neutralise them. What you can now see with the explosion in the sky is the debris falling from the sky. And of course, that is a problem itself because many people have been injured by the falling debris. But the most important thing is how effective it is. Up to 90% effective in total, which is a remarkably high interception and kill rate against the very many threats fired at it. In addition to the Iron Dome system, the Israelis also have other systems known as David Sling and the Arrow system. And these are designed particularly to hit ballistic missiles and hit them far out. The idea being to try and hit the targets long before they reach Israeli cities itself. But the Israelis are also constantly innovating, and the next stage in their layered air defense system is going to be the use of lasers to engage, again, multiple targets. And they're developing a system called Iron Beam, or Light Blade, which uses lasers to complement the Iron Dome. More importantly still, it's also going to be cost effective, because one of the challenges that everyone's got in this modern era is actually the cost of the interceptors can often be massive, particularly if you're dealing with multiple drone attacks. The drone itself might cost as little as $20,000, but the interceptor you fire at it could be several $1 million and also take a long time to construct. Lasers and laser defences give the possibility of a cost-effective air defence system against drones and such like targets. Israel may be small, but its reach is not. We're going to show you an attack against one of Iran's major military installations. In fact, it's the headquarters of the IRGC's Navy itself. Significantly to the east of Tehran, so some 1,800 kilometres or so from Israel itself, the IRGC Navy and the Iranian Navy has been a major target both for Israel and for the Americans in this current war because of their ability to strike and close the Straits of Hormuz. But Israel was able, with its air force and its missile systems itself, to engage and destroy the IRGC's Navy headquarters. The key to Israel's success are twofold. The first itself is good intelligence, so knowing where the target is. But the second element, which requires often detailed human intelligence, is actually the timing of the attack itself in order to cause maximum damage and to cause as much death and destruction amongst the senior personnel itself. We saw that in the attack against the Ayatollah, and then we've also seen this in the attack against this headquarters of the Iranian Navy itself. What Israel is also able to do is to put together very sophisticated, what you might call combined arms operations, using a combination of special forces, the F-35s, which they also have, the very finest fighter aircraft in the world, and drones itself. And the level of sophistication required to put these things together should not be underestimated. For military personnel, what they call combined arms manoeuvre, whether it be slightly old-fashioned now with artillery, armour and infantry, again, is one of the trickiest military manoeuvres you can do. But this is a modern version of that. Special forces, F-35s, the finest aircraft in the world, and drones itself. And the Israelis have shown themselves to be masters of this type of modern combined arms operation. All this technology is something else, though, which is a nation, a country designed for war. Israel, as we said at the beginning, lacks natural resources. It lacks oil. It lacks all sorts of things that other nations who have had strong militaries have taken for granted. What it does have is two absolutely essential elements. One is its people itself. The people themselves accept that the price of their freedom, the price of their survival as Jewish people, is they must be prepared to fight, and they all do. Conscription is universal. The Israelis accept that the price of their survival is being prepared for war. And part of that price is conscription, which is universal both for males and females within the country itself. And even beyond the conscripted service, when they're part of the regular armed forces, they then have continual reserve service thereafter, which gives them a sort of strength and depth throughout Israeli society as well. Beyond all that is a motivation. They're very conscious of the history of the destruction of the Jewish people of Europe during the Second World War. And the line, as always, is never again. And they've seen in the past the threats, the eliminationist threats that originally came from the Arab countries are now passed down through Iran and its proxies, where they talk about wiping out Israel from the river to the sea. They talk about the end of Israel and the killing of all Jewish people everywhere. And they take it seriously. They genuinely believe, and they've got history on their side, that they are serious. The Iranians are serious when they talk about eliminating Israel, but they are absolutely determined not to let that happen. And if sometimes, as a result, they appear, should we say, rather hard on the surface, that's because of their history and their background. So Israel's greatest strength, its real superpower strength, are its people. Intelligent, but also highly motivated and absolutely determined to defend Israel from all comers. But another part of Israel's strategy is its alliances. Up until now, we're very largely focused on Israel's own capability and its own capacity itself. But Israel needs its friends. If you're small, isolated, often, as one Israeli general said, living in a rough neighbourhood, you do need your alliances. And Israel, over the time, has cultured its alliances, particularly with the United States itself. So Israel has also managed to ensure that support to Israel has very largely been bipartisan, and that's something they're keen to maintain for the future. In terms of where the focus is, in terms of where the majority of the US support comes, part of it is financial. Up to 16% of the Israeli defence budget is provided directly by the United States. And this has enabled Israel to develop and use particularly F-35 fighters, but also develop the Iron Dome technology. This is, of course, a two-way street. In exchange for the provision of resources and the use of high-tech American equipment, the United States itself, and indeed, of course, its allies, also get combat experience and learn from what works and what doesn't work. So for the United States and Israel, it's not simply donations from the United States, it's very much a two-way process. One of the questions that arises is, are these really 5 separate wars, or is it all one major war? And the answer is a bit of both. Iran has certainly tried to bring all these different conflicts together under one overarching umbrella and deemed it to be this fight for the struggle of freedom of the Palestinian people. The honest reality is, though, they don't really care. I mean, the Palestinians themselves, while some of them are Muslim, some are Christian, but they're also Arabs. And traditionally, the Arabs and the Persians have been enemies more often than they've actually been friends. So to one extent, they see the R1 enemy against Israel. And we've seen that in the way in which Iran sponsored the proxy forces. Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, and also have stirred up the Palestinians in the West Bank. But the truth also is that all those conflicts all have their own local origins and causes as well. So Iran's genius, if you want to put it in those terms, has to bring them all together. But in terms of solutions, the solution to the issue of Lebanon, solution to the issue of Gaza, solution to the issue to what's going on in Yemen will all be different. And that's the point where you can start to treat them as separate conflicts as well. So to take it in the whole, does this make Israel a superpower? In many respects, the answer is yes. It has one of the finest militaries in the world. It's able to deal with multiple enemies at the same time. And as we've already seen, it's able to project force over long distance. And not just any old force, but really sophisticated combined manoeuvre of the modern kind. That makes it very much a superpower, and it's got the whole weight of the people behind it. But there are challenges. We must be honest about those challenges. And they very largely revolve around the position of the Palestinian people. A controversial issue, one we're not going to cover particularly in this programme, but we need to recognise that what happened with the Palestinian people may in some respects be regarded as Israel's Achilles heel. How it deals with that issue over time will determine whether or not Israel can be regarded as a superpower for the indefinite future. Dealing with multiple threats is very much part of the way in which Israel has to go to war. This is a matter of necessity, not necessarily choice itself. The scale of those threats and what the war actually consists of, whether it be open warfare, insurgency, or dealing with missiles, rocket attacks, or riots, may change from time to time. But the necessity, the ability, and the requirement to be able to deal with multiple threats at once will not change. So as we've seen, Israel's strategy is built on 4 things: technology, people, alliances, and one absolute driving necessity: survival. A small country surrounded by enemies has built a military designed to fight fast, adapt quickly, and stay one step ahead. But the threats continue to evolve: drones, militias, a growing confrontation with Iran, and that big question about what happens with Palestine and the Palestinian people. Can Israel's strategy keep working in the years ahead, or will the pressure of fighting on multiple fronts eventually force something new? Well, I'm Simon Diggins. Thank you for watching Superpowers Exposed.